Hello, everyone. Welcome again to our podcast show. I'm delighted to have everyone here. The goal of this show and this episode is to help anyone who is extremely passionate about persuasion, sales, and how they can get further in work and in life. So we're going to be covering every aspect on a system level when it comes to persuasion. So you'll see episodes from experts around the world in terms of health, focus, the art of persuasion, the science of persuasion, sales best practices, even human behavior and body language. My guest today is someone who I am delighted to have on the show. And it's not common that I find someone in sales who shares my perspective on the importance of the seller's mindset and the buyer psychology. So she's been in the sales game for 20 years, and her experiences range from companies, FMCG companies, retail companies, charities, and branding agencies. She founded Sales Psych to help sellers and businesses think more like their buyers and shift away from the traditional ineffective sales approaches. Trust, things like trust, mindset, well-being, just some of the hallmarks of her philosophy on sales high performance. So please help me welcome someone who is not only a member of the Association of Business Psychology, but has also served as a board advisor to a mental health charity. Please help me welcome Huma Khan. Huma, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you very much for having me. Really excited about talking to you today. Well, like you said, I share your sentiments. It's not often you find someone who shares similar perspectives and is definitely like-minded in terms of our views on what's important in sales.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion, Huma, because I think we're going to really challenge our viewers and listeners today. And that's the idea, right? Because what may have worked even 6 months ago is not going to necessarily work today, right? And in my view, sales is still stuck in the 90s. So we have a big issue to deal with. So let's start with the first big question. Let's really go for it. What are your thoughts on the current state of sales at the moment?
A loaded question. So I'd say probably in one word, challenging, if not broken. So I think we have a number of challenges to contend with. I think historically, this is something that's probably still plaguing us today. We've got some shoddy kind of dog eat dog type of practices in sales, which unfortunately are probably still practiced by some individuals and organizations even today that I come across in my LinkedIn feed and make me just kind of want to cringe. So I think we continue as salespeople to kind of have that sort of sullied reputation of salespeople can't be trusted. Right, so that's kind of like the first starting point. So I think that really means that we're always starting on the back foot to start with, and we kind of have to work twice as hard as anyone else to gain trust from our customers and our buyers. And then I think the pandemic now has actually further compounded this situation by instilling a greater sense of fear in salespeople. Certainly the ones that I've spoken to, and even speaking from my own experiences as well, and that's everything ranging from fear of not meeting targets, fear of losing their job or facing redundancy, which all kind of leads to a fear of kind of speaking out against unrealistic expectations or even job demands from employers at the moment, because everyone's kind of just trying to keep their job basically. And I think that is also having a further impact on mental health and physical health as well, and obviously well-being, and as a result, subsequently performance. And then, by the way, that's the same mindset that they're then taking into those customer conversations, right? So I think there's a few things going on, both historical as well as contextual in the current climate due to COVID and the pandemic.
There's a lot that you've covered there, all the way from the mental state and what the pandemic has exacerbated or even made worse in terms of speaking out against bad practices or unrealistic expectations. You've talked about the fact that buyers don't really trust salespeople or the sales profession. I think we know which statistic you're referring to from LinkedIn, I believe. So let's start with the exacerbation of unrealistic expectations, because my first instinct was to think, well, hasn't that always been the case? I mean, haven't we in sales always, depending, and again, this is dependent on the company and the culture of that business, absolutely. But as a whole, haven't we always faced unrealistic expectations, unrealistic demands of salespeople, which inherently pushes us to exhibit bad behaviors, especially onto the buyers? Hasn't that always been the case? Or do you feel that COVID has made it significantly worse? Because from my view, I think it's just brought out and made even more starkly clear what was always there that was bad. But maybe you have a different view. I'm interested to hear.
Yes and no. I think, yes, there have probably always been, I'd say, possibly unrealistic expectations from salespeople, particularly from the hierarchy, essentially the business that sets the sales targets. And I've worked in many organizations, many different types of organizations, and I think the common theme is that everyone wants double-digit growth year on year on year on year. And there comes a point where you kind of go, okay, but you have to understand the nature of the business, the nature of the industry, the maturity of the business itself. I mean, it's not always feasible to continue to deliver year on growth, right? It's particularly not double digit year on growth. You have to look at what's going on in the marketplace, for example. And I know organizations now that are still expecting double digit growth with the backdrop of COVID. Now, of course, there's an artificial base from last year anyway, artificially low base from last year, due to the fact that, we would have seen across pretty much every organization, bar some, that benefited from COVID, a huge and significant decline. So arguably that double-digit growth may be possible. But I think it's just the mentality and the mechanism of whether and how organizations set those goals, what the purpose of those goals are, which are meant to be motivating, realistic, and challenging, but achievable. And in some cases they are, and that's fantastic. If particularly where you've had the buy-in from salespeople, I'm a big fan of bottom-up approaches to forecasting and target setting, as well as the top-down, because quite often you get a top-down directive of, right, I want you to deliver X% growth. And when you kind of ask your sales team, right, what do you think you're going to be able to do based on your knowledge, your experience, your history with these clients that you manage, or new business, etc. And they come up with a totally different figure. Nobody wants to fail. Nobody wants to not hit their targets. Nobody wants to not earn their bonus or their commission, which is often the mechanic that kind of underpins the reward system, that underpins setting these targets in the first place. So it's kind of really about whether the goals are challenging, but also realistic and achievable, because there comes a tipping point where if you go too far, they become demotivating, right? So it has the absolute opposite effect. People switch off and they kind of go, actually, I haven't got hope in hell of achieving this, so why bother, right? So it's got to be something that's kind of like, yeah, I can do this. It's going to be hard, but I can do it, as opposed to I haven't got hope in hell. And that's kind of the difference. And I wonder, I think my concern really with the COVID piece is really around, I wonder how many organizations are trying to recover lost sales as a result of everything that's happened in the past year, as well as the increase in costs and cost of goods and cost of supply, etc., that we're seeing across the board anyway. That are those targets really achievable and realistic and positively challenging and motivating, or are they just unachievable, in which case are they going to have the opposite effect and actually just demotivate your sales staff and your sales team altogether?
So let's unpack that in more detail. I was on a Franklin Covey call, so basically the association of Stephen Covey, who wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I was on that call yesterday, And there was a stat, which is a well-known stat, shared where, companies that have highly engaged employees see a 21% improvement in profits. Forget sales, just profits, right?
Yeah.
So already the sales would be far higher.
Yeah.
So let's unpack what you just described there, because a lot of what you talked about is demotivating to the employees and to the salespeople. So where have you seen either sales leaders or business leaders do this in the right way? And let's go into the detail of probably how they do that. You already talked about bottom up forecasting and targeting, not just top down. So there's a kind of a calibration between the two. But let's go through the detail. How have you seen some of the best sales leaders and business leaders do this? And what do they start with? What are the steps that you recommend?
Yeah, and I think, again, it's understanding first and foremost the context of your market, the competition, what's actually happening in the marketplace. So actually understanding, so I remember when I was at Danone, for example, I was co-leading the business planning cycle for the entire organization. We helped develop the 3-year strategy plan, which obviously spanned across all functions, not just sales, so marketing, category, etc. And one of the things that we introduced actually was customer feedback, which at that time was a totally missing component. So we had feedback from our internal salespeople on how the sales plans and brand plans, etc., had landed with customers, but we never had the feedback directly from the customers feeding into what they needed and what their expectations were. That in itself was a game-changing element to add into the business planning process. And I would 100% urge anyone and every organization, I'm doing this currently myself as well, to speak to customers about what their pressure points are. It's not just about their needs and, obviously the problems which are kind of, standard when it comes to trying to, sell into organizations or customers, understanding their needs and their challenges, but it's also just understanding their processes and their kind of own pressures. So, as people, as individuals, what is it that they're tasked with delivering? What is going to make their lives easier? We should be helping our customers. What we do should be helping to make our customers' lives easier. And I think that's one of the foundations of that trust piece as well. Is what you do helping your customers and making their life easier, or actually are you just adding complexity into their day or their organization, which is going to then have the adverse effect. So I think one of the main things really for me is about understanding your market, understanding your customer, and building that into the process right from the start, because from that you may understand and you may unearth issues around their budgets, issues around their business, issues around their supply chain, issues around their challenges that you may have in your head, that this customer is going to be, one of your highest growing customers in this year. But in reality, they've got some challenges within their own organization, which mean that even with the best will in the world, that's never going to happen. So straight away, you've got, if you're setting your salespeople's targets with this vision in mind that I'm going to grow them by, 50% this year, and the customer's kind of going, oh, I don't think so, because we've got a big restructure going on at the moment, and we're having to get rid of about half of our staff. Budgets are all on hold. We have no idea, when we're going to be able to unlock anything. Straight away, you're setting that poor salesperson, account manager, account director, whatever it is, up for a fall, right? So they're going to be scrabbling around, then displaying all the wrong behaviors, using some of those pressure tactics, probably annoying the hell out of their customer, trying to get them to buy stuff without really understanding the context as to why, and what's going on for that customer. That's the reason why they aren't in a position to be able to, engage with you or buy from you or even continue trading as they were previously, right? So I think starting with the customer, I think is the important bit. And then, as I mentioned, I've then looked at, to my own kind of best in class processes that I've used, and particularly where I was working for one of the kind of leading agencies. We used to have an issue where we would consistently have a sort of reactive approach to gap fill. It's kind of a common phenomenon in sales. You set targets, often potentially unrealistic targets, or things change. The market is always dynamic, as we know. Competition is dynamic, as we know. So things change, and suddenly you're not on target, and then there's a gap to fill. So you're then kind of again scrabbling around, kind of going, right, we need to close this gap. Again, usually drives complete opposite behaviors in salespeople, because again, now they're operating from a place of fear, missing their targets, not achieving their bonus, not being able to pay for whatever it was that they wanted to pay for, the holiday, the kids, the extension, the new windows, whatever it was that they'd earmarked that bonus for, or even just actually surviving, right, for some people. So straight away they're then going around sort of operating from a place of fear, and displaying some of the negative behaviors that are actually going to have the opposite effect to actually growing sales. And so what I introduced with my team, by the way, that was as a result of that, I still hold one of the track records of delivering 5 consecutive quarters of budget beating growth, and the budget was not a soft target, right? It was a pretty high target.
Right.
So I know it works. We took a really proactive approach to contingency planning, and that's something that I teach even in some of the psychological concepts of hope, which is all around goal setting and goal planning and adaptability and contingency planning. It's looking at alternative routes to achieving your goal in advance of actually starting on that journey of achieving your goal. So you might have path A, which is probably the most direct, and tried and tested path to get to your goal. But if something goes wrong and path A is not working, and you now suddenly have a gap to that target, most people come unstuck because they haven't thought of a path B or a C or a D or an E. And now they're under time pressure, right? So because now they've only got like a month before the quarter ends, and they've got to close that gap. So actually, even though they might have come up with path B and D and C and E, there's not enough time to get there, right? Because they've had to do all the thinking. They've got to now, they're starting from the back foot. Whereas if you start with that approach in the first place, so at the start of the year, when you're setting your goals, you've got your goal in mind. You then kind of go, right, how am I going to achieve this goal? Okay, this is how we're going to achieve it. But okay, let's just have a think about what are all the things that could possibly go wrong. What are all the things that might possibly derail us? Even if we haven't had that feedback from the customer, let's just think ourselves outside the box and think about all the things that could possibly go wrong. And what can we do to try and overcome that? So that when and if that happens, we're not sitting there going, I hadn't thought of that, now what do I do? Right? We already go, okay, we've got a plan for that. So let's start executing that plan. And that is kind of the approach that I've taken that has led to a lot of success in the past.
So I had 3 main things there, Huma. Number 1 is know your customers, understand who they are, take the time to learn about them. And I'm going to come on to that one because it's a problem that really annoys me, and I don't understand why it's still an issue for B2B companies. B2C is a different animal. The second one is build a plan around the fact that you've understood your customers, right? That is going to be a critical point of your bottom-up targets and forecasting calculations, because you might have an expectation that we're going to grow this company by X%, but actually there's something going on in their business that's going to make that probably unrealistic, or it's going to take longer to get there.
Yeah.
Not because of your lack of sales skills, but quite frankly, there are forces outside of your control that can impact it. And that makes sense. The third part, I heard a lot there about the psychology, but more around the planning. So I've always said that the most successful salespeople, even in fact, the most successful business people, high performers, are paranoid. And when I say paranoid, I don't mean in the negative misconception of what paranoia is. Rather than be what I call delusionally positive mindset, they're actually optimistic, right?
Yeah.
And there's a difference.
Yeah. Or as I talk about actually in a lot of my practices, realistic optimism.
Realistic optimism, yeah. Exactly, right? And rather than just be positive all the time, which is delusional, say it's going to be okay, we're going to find a way, we're going to find a way. The most successful salespeople and most successful business people I've found in my research, and actually things I've practiced, are what are the risks? Okay, we know that it might go well, right? But what are the risks that could impact that? And more importantly, if those risks happen, do we have a plan that we can execute very quickly and confidently, rather than we have to figure it out and scrabble around and just almost kind of react in a way that's high pressure? Do we have a plan for when that situation will occur? And are we comfortable and clear on how we're going to execute on that? Yeah. Those are the kind of the three things that I caught from what you said. And that was really interesting. And there's a segue that you've kind of created for us, which are two things I really want us to cover today. And that is the buyer's psychology, or buyer's understanding, and the seller's psychology. And these are two things that I think are so badly left out or misunderstood, yet they're so crucial to the sales process, because at the end of the day, it is a human to human interaction. It is a psychology to psychology interaction. So let's start with the buyer side. Why is it that salespeople in B2B, right, and business in general, why are the average salespeople so bad at understanding their customers? And by that, I mean, if you ask someone, tell me about your ideal customer profile, they will give you very superficial answers, such as it's a FMCG company that has $1 to $1.5 billion of revenue per year. They have this type of outfit, and they are across these particular regions or geographical markets. No mention of the human being, no mention of the KPIs that this human being is adhering to, no mention of their bonuses, no mention of how they're being promoted, all the things that actually they're coming to work to do, right? What are their human needs, such as significance, or what are their values? No mention of that. Why do you feel it's so bad for salespeople to understand that?
I mean, I just don't think, as you say, I just don't think it's fully understood. Certainly not in the sales environment. I think marketers have a better grasp of consumer psychology from a brand advertising perspective. So, I've been to many sort of marketing kind of events and conferences where I've heard, psychologists and consumer psychologists, specialists in that field, talking about, how they apply that to the brand campaigns and to marketing, and, in order to persuade people to buy, from their homes or from their sofa, etc. So, and it, I always find that really fascinating, and then I kind of think, well, so but why don't we do that in the business to business environment? Why aren't we applying that same logic, that same philosophy to the business to business environment? Because, as in the simplest terms, we are human beings first before we are representatives of products, services, or organizations. And we ignore that at our own peril, right? So that for me is, where the sales functions are so far behind. And whilst I think it seems to me that it's kind of been disguised or masked in this sort of term customer centricity, everyone's jumped onto that bandwagon, been widely adopted by many organizations, many sales organizations. And they kind of think, well, yeah, job done. We're customer centric. We've asked customers for feedback. So and that's the kind of sum of their kind of philosophy around what customer centricity is. So its primary focus is, in sales training and in all of the literature and communications that I see, is all around understanding customer needs from an organizational perspective, right? So what's the problem that is facing the organization as opposed to the individual, right? And there is little, if not, I would say, arguably no recognition of the human needs and motives or even emotions of the buyer representing the organization. And as I mentioned, we are first and foremost, unless you're buying online, okay, and that's a whole different segment, but it's unless you're buying online, you are dealing with, whether you're talking to a business, whether you're talking to a consumer, whether you're in retail, whether you're in charity, it doesn't matter. You are talking to a human being first before you are talking to products, services, organizations, and I think that is a real disconnect, and I've seen it fall apart on many occasions. There's a reason why I in my career, I have been asked to step onto accounts to turn around broken relationships because the buyer has refused to trade with us, the organization at the time, as a result of a relationship breakdown with the prior person. And so if you don't understand that dynamic of how important the person is, I've recently seen on LinkedIn kind of people, talking quite a lot about how the salesperson, is kind of becoming redundant. Most transactions are moving online. True, we do a lot of buying online, there's no doubt about it. And likability and trust, these things don't really have a place, or are over embellished or over exaggerated, because actually it all just comes down to, are you servicing the customer? Are you delivering something that they need and want at a fair price? And all of those things are true. So yes, of course, you do need to be delivering a product or service that solves a problem for the client, in their business that they're representing. So I'm not discounting that, but I think to discount and ignore the human being that you're dealing with first is, I would say, foolish. And that's why I say you ignore that at your own peril, because, essentially I know from so many of my own personal experiences that people will not buy from someone that they don't trust, and that is first and foremost the biggest hurdle that you kind of have to get over before you then move into the space of, okay, how does this product or service solve my business need and challenge and all of those other things which are really important. So 100%, sales processes, the sales cycle, I know inside out. Yes, you need to know those things, they are foundational. It's important to have that solid grounding in sales capabilities, processes, systems, and the whole sales cycle. But the bit that's missing for me still to today is the acknowledgement of the human being in the process.
I have to say, all those people that you mentioned that are sharing such information on LinkedIn about trust, etc., and likability is going to become is less important. I don't care how controversial it sounds, that they haven't done their homework at all. They have not. I would wager for you to come to that answer, you haven't spoken to a single B2B buyer, because I've interviewed over 400. In fact, it's close to 418 now, and still at 418, I thought this would degrade after time. Every one of them, when asked what made you select this salesperson versus someone else to do business with, whether it's a competitive bid or an uncompetitive bid, every one of them have used either the word trust or honesty in their description, right? Everyone, right? So it's hugely important. Why don't we tackle how it might be harder at a system business level to bring that in? That's a very big discussion, but what can the individual salesperson do? Those who are very interested in doing this the right way, what could they do to start learning more about the customer, their buyers, and that buyer's psychology? What quick tips can you give them to help them on that journey?
I was going to say, speak to someone like you or me. So listen to this podcast. So there is you know, as there always is that accountability, I guess, you know, from the individual. I think it's a tough ask though. I think it's a tough ask for salespeople who are already so inundated, you know, bogged down by all of the things that they have to deliver, for them to then make time for that self-growth and that self-learning, because, you know, and actually just do it all by themselves. Now, I mean, you know, arguably, I would say that's one of the hallmarks of a great salesperson, you know, is actually putting your being in charge of your own learning and development. And, you know, that's something that I wholeheartedly, you know, for myself do, you know, from the fact that, you know, as a salesperson and a sales leader, you know, I'm doing my master's in occupational business psychology, you know, for that reason, not because someone's asked me to, definitely not a sales you know, course or anything that, you know, anyone in my sales career has suggested that I do at all, ever. But that was my own kind of thirst for knowledge of wanting to understand, why is it that people behave the way that they do? What makes one salesperson more successful over another? What makes someone buy a product or service or not? You know, so those are things that I have just always been pretty obsessed about myself as a salesperson, as a sales leader, because I'm always wanting to drive high performance, both in myself, but also, you know, for my team as well. So, you know, I've kind of adopted that, I guess, self-learning growth mindset myself. Yeah, so I think it's really important for salespeople, and I certainly have adopted that myself, you know, in terms of having that growth mindset, that learning kind of mindset. You know, every day is a school day as far as I'm concerned. I learn something new every day. So it's but, you know, and those are some of the habits of highly successful people, not just salespeople, just highly successful people across the board. And I'm sure everyone's familiar with Carol Dweck's work in this space around growth mindset. And if you're not, I'd definitely familiarize yourself with some of her TED Talks, which are quite accessible in this space. But, you know, I think it all kind of comes down to whether you understand or even want to understand some of those things that I mentioned. You know, what is it? You know, so are you someone who's actually just ticking the boxes when it comes to sales, or is it something that you're really passionate about? Is it something that you want to be really successful in, that you want to have a career in, that you want to excel in, that you want to progress in, that you want to help others progress in, but more importantly, that you want to do it in the right way? I mean, I think, you know, for me, I'm just constantly on this mission to try and turn that sort of we talked about at the start, the shoddy perception of sales, and it kind of, you know, that's why it kind of irks me every time I see people kind of saying things that kind of go against, you know, the, I guess, integrity I feel that the profession should have and rightly deserves to have, because it's all about helping people, but yet it's positioned as something that's, you know, untrustworthy or, you know, manipulative and, you know, very self-serving. Whereas in fact, actually, it should be the total opposite, because it's about serving others. Sales is all about serving others. It's all about customer service. And, you know, but in order to really understand that, you need to understand, you know, your buyers. So, you know, what's going on for your buyer? What is their core motivation for wanting to buy your product or service? You know, what needs might they be trying to meet? What are the things throughout the sales process? You know, even when we just look at emotions, you know, the basic, you know, human, you know, physiological, psychological makeup of every human being. What's the emotional cycle that a buyer goes on as they go through that sales process with you? What journey are you taking them on? How are you positively or negatively impacting your buyer? You know, who, by the way, is another human being. So how are you positively or negatively impacting another human being to either buy or not buy your product? And there are so many benefits to understanding that. You know, when we even talked about that trust piece and the likability piece, and you know, there's loads of research. I mean, you know, David Hoffeld wrote a whole book on science of selling, you know, one of my favorite books, and you know, he talked about 53% of customer loyalty is driven by the salesperson's behavior, with trust being a key component of that. You know, how do you deliver trust, or how do you create trust? You know, when you look at the trust equation, you know, it's the whole intimacy and reliability and authenticity, and then, you know, over kind of serving your customer. You know, looking at the trust equation, you know, how do you, you know, the likability aspect within that, which I think is undermined and underplayed. You know, how you get someone to like you, you know, that's a whole, you know, other question as well. So there are so many factors, psychological components to the sales process that are ignored within the traditional sales training model. And you know, we don't all need to be psychologists, right? So I'm not saying to everyone, okay, run off and, like, you know, start a master's in psychology or do a degree, or, you know, that's why what I'm trying to do, and no doubt what you're trying to do, is trying to, through, you know, we're doing the work, we're doing the hard grafting. You know, I'm doing the degree, I'm doing the research, I'm doing the, you know, the dissertation and the thesis, I'm doing all of that so that I can actually make buyer and seller psychology more accessible for the average salesperson. And it's not just about, you know, I'm sure there are other ways that you can access information, you know, online, YouTube, TED Talks, etc. You just kind of need to know where to look, but you need to have it then needs to be self-directed, right? So you then, in some cases, it's quite a hard ask, I think, for salespeople, because you're asking them to try and find something that they may not know. You don't know what you don't know. You know, and because it's such a new area, because it's such a new concept, I guess, for salespeople to kind of get their head around, they could quite easily, you know, either end up going to the wrong type of information, or go down a rabbit hole that kind of takes them nowhere. So it's, I think, a bit of a hard task to make it completely self-directed. I think the sales leaders and sales organizations do have a responsibility to kind of provide their sales teams with more of these types of you know, either workshops, courses, information, you know, just making it more accessible for them.
Yeah, what I want to get into is some simple tactics that they can use to at least start the process, right? And you know, appreciate that it's quite difficult for a lot of salespeople to do that. You've got to have the trait of a self-learner. It's going to take some time. There might be some trial and error. But I think the first thing that a salesperson can do is to speak to the customers themselves. So either directly, if they have the capacity to do so, and if it's part of their role, they should absolutely do that. It's criminal that they wouldn't if that's part of their role. But even if it's not, you have your account managers, you have your marketing team, you have your CEO and the leadership who hopefully will have those kind of answers. If not, that's a red flag. But you know, and as you say, it doesn't have to be overly complicated. You don't really need to know psychology. All you need to do is ask the buyer and say, tell me about the last time that you had a great sales experience, and what made that such a great buying experience with the seller, and when you had a really bad one. And you know, find out what the buying process is, or what you understand to be the buying process for your types of products or services. And then simply ask your buyers, how do you feel when you go through those processes? How do you feel at this stage? How do you feel at that stage? You know, what do you hate about this stage? What do you like about that stage? And you're not going to get the answer in a 1-hour conversation. This is something that you are going to progressively 2% improvements at every time, kind of build that picture just like a jigsaw puzzle. So I think it's something that salespeople can not very easily, but it's straightforward. Doesn't necessarily mean easy, but just ask your buyers. You have a wealth of information there that you can tap into. There isn't much freedom and ability offered to them to do so. I get that, because they were being asked to do something ridiculous like 100 cold calls a day to get a measly 1 or 2 appointments, right? Which is hugely ineffective. But those were my thoughts there. I don't know if you have any others, because I really want our listeners to walk away with at least step 1 or 2 that they can start looking into to help them on this journey.
I think that sort of approach is really going to depend on the nature of sales, because obviously sales is quite broad, so it kind of depends on what kind of industry and what type of salesperson you are, and also what kind of relationship you have with the salesperson. So in order to ask your buyer, I've done this myself actually, with a buyer that I had a very good relationship with and who trusted me implicitly, and we did this is way before I even set up Sales Psych, and we did have a conversation. It might have been one of the conversations that actually inspired me to kind of go down the route that I did. But where I did kind of ask her, what is it that makes you want to buy from one salesperson over another? But the thing is, I had that relationship with her to be able to do that. We met for a coffee, we met for a lunch. So not everybody has the relationship to do that, the time to do that, because actually they've just secured a meeting, after 2 months with this client. So they've got like a list as long as their arm of all the agenda points they need to get through. And if they don't have that relationship or that trust to kind of then start asking those kind of questions about how someone feels, about, whether it's a good experience or a bad experience, and those kind of things can feel quite intrusive, right, for someone who doesn't have that relationship with you. It's an interesting one, I think. And interestingly, when I did have that conversation with that buyer, she also said the thing that made her buy over one person over another was how much she liked them. And trust as well, obviously kind of implicitly implied, and in simple terms, she said, if I like them, I give them more of my time, so they are exposed to more opportunities. Whereas it doesn't mean if she doesn't like them, she still needs to work with them, she'll still work with them, but it is more on a tighter leash, right? It's kind of like more of a transactional kind of relationship, down to the bare minimum, right? So
yeah, I've got to say, I see where you're coming from. I have a slightly different view, so I may challenge you on this one. I have a slightly different view, because I think almost every single B2B company out there must have at least a handful of customers that they have, or clients they have a good relationship with.
I
hope so, right? They can ask that kind of question. So this is not about every single salesperson. Yeah. This is about, are we as a business raising our intelligence and our knowledge on the customers, which we can then disseminate to everyone.
Okay, yeah. So
certainly hope so. Even if it's not the salesperson, maybe, hopefully salesperson, but marketing have a role to play in that. Yeah. Even product development have a role to play with that. The leaders better have a role to play with that. Yeah. Otherwise, that is, as I said before, a big red flag.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. It depends, absolutely depends on the relationship. Absolutely depends on the comfort level of the buyer as well.
I would say in terms of then, kind of what's the thing that, so yes, I think if it's at an individual salesperson level, I think it's a hard ask unless you have that relationship. And depending on what type of, kind of industry you're in, like cold calling is very different to relationship management in an account management type of situation. So I think, of course, if you have that natural curiosity, you're self motivated, and you have that growth mindset, and like I said, I had it naturally. So I would ask these questions naturally where I had the opportunity. It wasn't with an agenda. It was just curiosity. I just wanted to know, and so yes, of course, I would encourage salespeople to do that if they have the opportunity to do that. I think then, as an organization, though, as the leadership, as the whether it's a sales leader or whether it's marketing or insights or whatever, within that mechanism of customer centricity, as we talked about, within that mechanism of gathering customer feedback, which every organization, I'd be amazed if they don't gather in some shape or form nowadays, usually quite transactional, usually quite service orientated, price orientated, some kind of rating on, how well we did and all that kind of stuff. But if there's a way of building in some conversation, some questions into that existing or pre-existing customer feedback mechanism, which could very easily ask, describe your best sales experience with us, and why. Describe your worst sales experience with us and why, and asking some of those types of questions, which are less transactional and actually are more going to be more informative on the kind of, the emotions, the motivations, the needs, the psychology of the customers. That would be really helpful. So I would definitely start there with existing kind of feedback mechanisms, rather than trying to kind of do something totally new that may not happen. It's probably easier, quicker win, I think, that way.
Agreed. And as a salesperson, even if you can't ask those questions because of the circumstance you've described, I would hope, and there's always a way, if you can ask those people in your business that either should have the answer or are part of seeking that answer, lobby them to get those questions injected in there, because it's in everyone's interest to make sure that sales are doing a better job. So the time has flown by here, Huma, and we didn't even get to cover the seller's mindset and psychology. That is, for me, an area that is so vital. And when someone talks to me about how do you improve sales performance, the first thing I say is forget all the training programs, deal with the four elements of a human being: mind, body, heart, spirit. Because you can give them all the tools in the world, but if those four things are not in the right place, they will end up picking up a screwdriver to hammer a nail into something, right? It's just not, they're going to use the wrong thing. So maybe we'll invite you to another episode, again, another show, so that we can cover that.
Delve into the salesperson's mindset more,
Absolutely. But there are a couple of questions I just want to quickly ask you then, just to wrap up. First one is, if there was one thing that you wish that you had learned or appreciated earlier in your life, what would that be? And it may not be sales related.
I actually wish I had studied psychology a lot earlier. So I'm kind of a bit late to the party, and also had to take a break because I had a baby in between. But I think I've always been fascinated, as I said, around the human psychology of people, both in and out of work, so it's not just a work-related topic or interest. And I think, had I have actually studied it earlier when I did my degree instead of just doing business, which also helped. But I think it would have helped me answer the kind of 101 questions that I had as I progressed throughout my career, and definitely would have helped me navigate some of those more trickier leadership and client challenges that I sort of faced along my sales career. So, and that, like I said, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. And I appreciate that not everyone can go off and do a degree in psychology, and doesn't necessarily have to. But I think for me, that's the thing that I would have, it would have just helped in my mind context a lot of the things that I experienced along the way, which now I can kind of go,
exactly.
Okay, so that's what that was about, or that was related to, I can sort of package it up in my in my own head now as, oh right, so that was because of like my mindset, that was because of my beliefs, or that was because of that person's limiting beliefs, or that was because of that experience, or that I can kind of understand that a bit more coherently now, I think.
Yeah, well, I would argue that raising a child is a quick, practical way of learning psychology, if you're willing to be open to observe, listen, and learn, right? So very interesting. And if there was one thing that you would like our viewers and listeners to take away from this discussion, or one thing that you feel is so vital that they should take away from, we may have not discussed it, what would that be?
I think it's about, I want sales leaders to kind of be more open-minded, I guess, in understanding the benefits of what we're talking about, in terms of, why seller mindset is so important, why buyer mindset or buyer psychology is so important. And I get it, even from my own conversations, with clients and prospects, etc. Because despite the numerous scientific studies out there that, do support what we're talking about, otherwise we wouldn't be talking about it. As a sales leader myself, we are driven, targeted, and measured on delivering a return on investment, right? So, and anything with a psychological component can be harder to measure for an organization, particularly when the output is sales revenue and there are so many other variables that influence sales revenue, right? So yep. It can be done, right? So the thing is, it's not that it can't be done, it can be done. There are many scientific studies that show it can be done. It just requires setting up the right controls, to measure that ROI in the first place. But of course, if the organization wants it specifically for their organization, that can be time consuming and more costly to set up for individual organizations. So most organizations just kind of end up relegating it to that too hard or nice to have box, and kind of trundle on back at, down the traditional sales training problem. I've got a problem with sales performance. Oh, let me just throw some negotiation skills training at it. It's not going to work. So, if I've seen time and time again, people tell me that they need sales training or negotiation training or objection handling training. And even when they've had the training, they still don't do what they were meant to do, or I've seen them fall apart in front of my eyes in a negotiation. Okay, that is not down to skills or lack of skills or lack of skills-based training. They know what to do. They're not doing it because of the stuff that's going on up here. And if we don't address that, and if we don't include that or understand that within the makeup of what we provide salespeople with and equip salespeople with, which kind of goes back to the seller mindset piece, then I think you're kind of not only setting yourself as a business up for fail, but also the individuals that you're bringing into the organization. We're not talking about everybody. This isn't just about people failing. This is all about how you actually take average performance to higher level performance, right? So it's not just about people who are underperforming, as most, training initiatives tend to be focused on. This is actually just about how do you even get people who are kind of here going further than they can? How do you unlock the potential to get them to move further, up to higher performance?
Yeah, really interesting. Really interesting. How can our viewers and listeners learn more about you, connect with you?
Well, hopefully we'll share some of those details in with this, but yeah, you can start by visiting my website, www.salespsych.co.uk, or you can email me. I'm on LinkedIn as well, Instagram, so we can share all of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully, and I'm always happy to just have a chat, because it is a new area, and I'm more than happy to just talk to people about it, and understand. I've had so many conversations with prospects and clients telling me that what they think they need, and actually when we talk about it, we kind of always end up down. It's the challenge they're experiencing is not a skills-based issue, which is what they initially think it is. It usually always comes down to there's some kind of psychological barrier, or there's some kind of psychological component to it.
Yeah, fair. No, and we will leave those links in the show notes so that people can access them. So Huma, it's been a pleasure speaking with you and learning from you. And I'm sure that our viewers and listeners have learned a ton here. Thank you. And we should probably have you again in order to discuss the seller psychology for sure.
Excellent. No, it's been fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you again, Huma.